studio with me today, Deacon Glenn Ridder is back, and he has brought his lovely wife, Colene. Welcome to you both.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It's nice to be here.
Yeah, so I haven't had a deacon and his wife in for a little while to tell their story. And of course, Deacon Ridder was here recently to do a couple episodes with us, and I was like, please bring your wife in because I want to hear your story. It took a little time because these guys, you two are busy. You got a lot going on.
We can be busy.
All right, so we wanted to find out how you got your call to become a deacon. And what that journey has been like as a married couple, because if you don't know this already, if this is your first time hearing a deacon story, it is very much an effort for the couple. Yes, the man becomes the deacon, but it has to be, the wife has to be in agreement. It is a dual purpose mission.
Definitely.
I can say it that way.
Team
Yes.
effort.
Yes, team effort. It's way easier to say it that way. All right. Whichever one of you would like to start, you just give us a little background on you and your family.
Go ahead.
Okay. So I'm Colene Ridder, been married 40 years to my dear husband, wife and mother with 4 children and 9 grandchildren.
Oh, wow.
And so our journey with the diaconate, I think I will let Glenn answer that question about how that call actually happened and what that looked like. But it's been an adventure, and I think for me the response to the call as a wife of a deacon, I think the grace to really love the church was like the presupposition for this type of growth and development to actually take place.
Yeah.
Because there is a lot of giving and that type of not at mass together and what that looks like, but it was a grace to be able to know that I love the bride of Jesus Christ.
Right.
So I can stand behind that.
Yeah.
Even though it does take some interesting dynamics with that.
Yes. So I'm going to let you talk about more of that as we go. What do you do, Colene?
Well, I'm a part-time pharmacist.
Oh, okay.
Very limited, but so that's been a part of my journey because I met him in pharmacy school when he was still just starting medical school.
Okay.
And I wrapped up pharmacy. So through those beginning years, it was really my work that was paying the bills to help us. And with pharmacy, there was always part-time work, so I stepped away from it for many years and raised children, and delightful, experience with that. But then slowly came back on a part-time basis.
Yeah, that's nice.
Yeah.
And Deacon Ridder, you were not always a deacon. You've been a doctor for many years.
I've been a doctor since 1985.
Yeah.
And the deacon program was kind of interesting, or the calling, I should say.
Yeah.
So a lot of people don't realize that when Colene and I were married, it was her father, a permanent deacon in the Omaha diocese, that married us.
Oh, okay.
And my father kind of looked at my father-in-law then for a few years and decided he would enter the diaconate program. So my father was a permanent deacon as well in the Omaha diocese.
How long has he a deacon?
Oh, Norman, Colene's dad, was one of the first classes of rural diaconate in Nebraska, so 1979, I think.
Yeah.
And my father was
95. He was ordained in 1995.
Wow.
95.
Okay,
Yeah.
so you really, you didn't grow up with it, but because you were probably in college by then, I imagine.
Oh, we were
medical school, or married.
Yeah, we were married.
Yeah.
when
I
he
was in
ordained.
college back in there, but then by the time your dad was ordained, we had children.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah.
And so that, we were very aware of the diaconate role. And it was kind of interesting because I was already married and have kids. And so when we get together, with my father especially, then we go to Mass. And then we were done with Mass, then he and I would talk about the homily and what he might have said if it was his homily, or what I might have said if it was mine.
Because deacons can do homilies.
Yes. And he just looked at me one time with one of those conversations. He goes, "When are you going to join the diaconate?" And I go, there should be an if. There should be an if there, Dad. Well, there was no if in his mind. So sad to say he died before I entered into the diaconate.
Yeah.
But I thought about it off and on ever since that, because I go, there was no if. And so we had young kids, so I didn't kind of put it aside for a while. And then I have been meeting with men since like 1996 in men's groups with the Catholic Church. And one of them was Deacon John Devlin.
Sure.
And one day we were at our men's meeting, and he and I had a little time to talk afterwards. And I goes, well, this kind of passed my mind. And it was the timing. And John says, well, yeah, if you want to enter this coming class, you need to put your name in right away, because it takes about a year to go through all the clearance and all the background checks and all that kind of stuff. And so that morning at that meeting, I said, fine, put my name down. And I went home and told my wife this. And she goes, well, shouldn't we talk about this? And I go, sure, because she was already kind of the consummate church lady. And I go, well, are you going to have a problem with this? And I said, well, the whole idea is 4 years. So the first 1 year, you're not even recognized by the church.
Right.
And I said, well, we can back out any time if it doesn't work. And so it was kind of strange, because that always comes up when this call comes. It says, we didn't talk about it first.
So can I stop you there? Colene, what was going through your head right then when he came home and said, well, I signed up for this? You're like, what?
Right, exactly. We should be talking about this prior to a third person getting involved in it. So we had that conversation. Again, it is that slow realization. It's not about me, and to enter into that service. But that's kind of a communication thing between us, in the sense of, well, I already told John I was going to have consider the diaconate. Right. And then, I thought, oh, it probably didn't go in the right sequence.
Right. But that's okay.
God works with that.
Yes.
And you have 4 years to decide, is this the right thing or not?
Yeah.
So, and that's
but I would have liked to have been called before John Devlin.
He just cut in line a little bit. No biggie.
That's right.
That's the one way to.
All right, Deacon Ridder. So go on with the story. How did this proceed?
Well, then, like I say, we had that conversation, and we came to realize that she wouldn't have discouraged me from looking at it again with the way the process goes. I mean, you're again not even known by anybody in the church until a year later when you decide, or you make the cut. So the whole formation, the discernment process for any kind of clerical role is both sides. It's not just me that decides I want to be and that's what's going to happen. It's the church that may decide you aren't cut out for this.
Right.
And so that's why I was very comfortable with that whole idea. And it was kind of interesting was they do this interview and they would say, well, what makes you want to become a deacon? And at that stage in life, I said, I can give you all kinds of reasons why I don't want to become a deacon. But I am here because I was asked.
Okay.
And Bishop Carlson always talked about, when he was our bishop, to make a generous step, one step. And you go, okay, well, this is a 4 different big steps. And you go, fine, I'm going to make a generous step. And if it doesn't fit, it doesn't fit.
Right.
And they would say, well, what happens if you don't become a deacon? And I go, I would be ecstatic. I'd be fine with that. But I stayed to the course.
Yeah.
And one of the things about the diaconate, too, is, that you're in persona Christe servum.
Right.
And as a servant, and not as the head, the capitis in persona Christe capitis, as the priest that actually does everything that Christ could do. I am limited. And they say, what's the toughest thing about this path? And I said, well, as a physician of many years, I've either been the boss or at least one of the bosses. Yeah. And the whole idea of the diaconate is instead of climbing the ladder of success, you're actually descending the ladder of success when success is true service.
Right.
So it's not like I'm demoting myself. Right. I'm actually becoming more of a servant. And so I said, that's the toughest part, because I like to take charge. And most physicians' personalities are in a lot of cases, somewhat caustic. So they like to take charge. And so I said, well, I got to give up some of that leadership. You could say that it's not aggressiveness, but assertiveness.
Sure.
And say, okay, I need to step back and say, realize who's in charge. And as I got into the program, I really loved it. I mean, one of the things I was really looking for was this discipline. To say, okay, well, if you want to do something like this, you have to be in prayer. You have to be in a good relationship with God. And I said, well, I want that, but I've always been a project guy, and there's always other projects that came up. And so in this case, it actually initially just became a project. Can I do this? Can I get this discipline? And, you're obligated to pray more. You're truly obligated in the program to pray more. And initially, it's a discipline. You go, okay, I have to do it. I'm obligated. And it doesn't take very long before, I kind of like this. And, it's always a work in process, so that by the time right now, if I miss my 2 obligations of daily prayer, I miss it. I have to do it, to the point where if like this morning, I had a 6:45 meeting. I got up an hour and 15 minutes early so that I could get my prayer time in.
Right.
And yesterday I had a 6 o'clock meeting, so I'm up at 4:45 to get my hour of prayer in before I go to the meeting, because I don't feel comfortable if I miss that.
Right.
And so it is part of the whole process to build the discernment and the discipline that goes along with, do you really feel called to do this?
Yeah.
And the church never told me to leave, so I stayed put. And I said, I'm fine,
Yeah.
And so by the time we were crossing the threshold to ordination, I was certainly convinced, as I know my wife was as well, that this is where I need to be.
Yeah. Okay, so I'm going to ask you one more question, and then I'm going to go to Colene. Did this process, becoming a deacon, change how you were a doctor?
Yes, and all that was kind of happening at the same time that I was getting into the thought of this. I've always, been known to my nurses and the ancillary people that I'm Christian, and so when I'm in the clinic, I'm the only Catholic that's there at that time. And so I'd be getting, gifts for Christmas and for birthdays and stuff that had scripture readings and things like that on it. And I was tucking them in my office space as opposed to my exam rooms, because I thought, well, I'm a cradle Catholic. Here's my face. It's tucked in here somewhere. If you really want, I could pull it out for a little while, but I'm going to put it back.
Right.
And after a while, I go, I'm getting too much. I don't have any more space on my walls. I go, why am I afraid to put these in my exam rooms?
Right.
And I took most of the kind of society's prints and things off my walls, and I put these plaques up and with scripture verses on it. And I'd walk in the room, and there's a young mother writing down the scripture verse that was up there. And I go, that never happened before.
Yeah.
And so I became much, much more comfortable with my life as a Christian.
Yeah.
And much more open, to the point where I would visit with patients about Christianity.
Wow.
And it was kind of interesting because, in society, they don't expect the Catholic to start talking about their faith.
Right.
I never expected
We
the
don't
Catholic to
usually
talk
do
about
that
their faith.
very well.
And so I'd be talking to some, evangelical that are very exuberant about faith as a patient in the office. And they would look at me and say, well, what church do you go to? And I said, well, I go to St. Mary's Catholic Parish here in town. And the look of shock on their face, go, you're a Catholic?
Yes.
Like, wow, this doesn't sound like any Catholic I was ever aware of.
Yeah.
So, I was becoming very comfortable with my faith and more bold with my faith at the same time that this happened. So it was all God's plan to say, I think you're ready now.
Yeah.
And it was like my dad saying, I think you're ready now.
Yes.
Instead of, is there ever going to be an if? No.
No. So, Colene, what was this journey like for you, walking with Glenn?
Right. So I kind of mentioned about my love for the church and the gift of faith. And so when I had the opportunity to accompany him in the formation classes, I was all about it. I am at heart a student. I love and then scholarly scripture theology courses. That is something that my heart just comes alive with.
Yeah.
So I was very much at a place of receiving the great catechesis, and through, just that the diocese provides for that formation. And then I got to accompany him in that.
Yeah.
So honestly, when we ordained it's now 5 years ago,
6.
I missed, 6 years in May. I missed the getting together and that formation.
Yeah.
I
bet
so was accustomed every, Saturday,
like,
once
let's do
a
this
month.
forever, right?
I know. Like these are, then they became my brothers.
Yeah.
The deacon men
Yeah.
And
are my brothers.
sisters.
Yeah.
With that.
And the wives are involved.
Yes.
Yeah, but we just are attentive to the classes, and
Yeah.
I don't do the paperwork and that type of thing or the interviews, but I enjoyed the formation very much.
How has it changed your marriage?
Well, it is,
You've been
there are
married a long
challenges.
time before you even became a
Yes.
deacon.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and people would say, even in the initial interviews, you okay with Colene, are you okay with sitting in the pew when Glenn's up in the altar? And she goes, he's usually in the choir, or I'm with the kids, and we would trade places so that I go, what? We're hardly ever sitting together anyway because we're doing separate things. And so, no, that wasn't an issue, which apparently is for quite a few women to say, okay, I like
can understand
my
that.
husband be beside me.
yeah.
And like Colleen said, she was very actively participating. Of the 4 that were ordained with me, the wives were always way quieter. There was a couple that didn't hardly speak at all during this. And Colleen was always asking a lot of questions. She would read the stuff. She didn't write the papers, and she didn't sit in the classes. And we had online classes and things with Notre Dame and with the Josephinum College out of Ohio, and kind of some late night stuff sometimes. But she was always up on the reading, anything that needed to be done, and she was always very open with comments and questions during the formation, which made it also very comfortable for me that, we're okay with this.
Yeah. Yeah. Okay. So Deacon, what kind of things do you do? Is you're out at JP2 out in Harrisburg, right?
JP2 is one of the 3, and Christ the King, but the primary one is St. Mary's.
Okay.
And because of the way the Set Ablaze has got, they're juggling, priest all the time. In our particular area, the priests move to a different parish every week.
Okay.
Which makes communication a little bit more difficult. And there's 2 deacons in the pastorate, myself and Deacon Jim Borman.
Oh, sure.
And like I say, I do the baptismal classes. I am involved in, the diocesan regional marriage prep classes.
Okay.
And so I do those things, and the liturgy, I will do one mass a weekend in one of, generally it's either St. Mary's, mostly St. Mary's, and occasionally John Paul II.
Oh, okay.
But as far as preaching, the priests want to get themselves known by the congregation, so I preached one time officially at a mass since July of last year.
That's been a long time.
Long time. And I enjoy
you miss it.
doing homilies.
Yeah.
But I also enjoy my pastor and my associate vicars, Father Jacob Doty and Father Mark Lichter, very much. So I said, whatever makes it simpler for you guys at this point, I will have my opportunity.
Yeah. Yeah, because again, you're at their service.
Yeah,
so
exactly.
And the service of the parishes. So, Colene, what do you get to do? Just support him? I don't know, because it's always different with every couple. So, what are the kind of things you get to do with him, or you do with him?
In the role of a wife of a deacon is so diverse. There's so many different ways to look at this. So I'm not actively directly involved in the work of his role as a deacon.
Okay.
And I'm very fine with that because that's his calling and that role. So I look at it more as like John is my favorite gospel in the wedding feast of Cana when Jesus asked the servants to fill the 6 stone jars. They're sitting there and the servants fill those, and I've read someplace 30 gallons each jar, so our 180 gallons of water were being filled. So just that hidden essential movement of that step for this great manifestation of Jesus's
Yeah.
following, his mother's word, this time for the miracle to take place. I feel like the role of a deacon's wife is that hidden filling those 6 stone jars. There's that part of it, but it's not like it's front and center. Then Jesus takes this and does the miraculous.
Yeah. Yeah.
But had the servants not carried out their role, is just how I've sort of processed through this to know that, okay, I see there's some, there's an important part to it, but it isn't, everything, because his word changes the water into wine.
That's a really good way to look at it.
So that's how I approach the wife of a deacon and my role in that. And that, yes, important, but kind of under the radar.
Yeah, that makes sense. Deacon Ridder, we're pretty much out of time, but I want you real quick, in about 30 seconds.
Okay.
If a man came to you and said, what's it like being a deacon and should I do it? What do you say to him?
I would always go back to Bishop Carlson's comment. He said, go for it. Take that generous step and realize you're not obligated until you're ordained.
Right.
And that's for now 5 years down the road.
Yeah.
The program is now a 5-year program. And so you have nothing to lose, and you will become a better Catholic because of the discipline that's involved in whatever part of it you do continue through. And so there's lots of, we had 8 when we started. 2 bowed out fairly quickly, and we'd had 6 until about 3rd year. And then 2 of them backed out, and 1 backed out right before, about a month before ordination. So it left 4 of us to be ordained. And so anywhere along the line, they can either say, this isn't going to work for me, or the church can say, keep your day job.
Right. Very true. All right. Thank you guys very much for coming in. I really appreciate it. Thank you for telling your story. I think it's just really helpful for people to see the life of the church kind of behind the scenes and how it all happens and comes about. Where do deacons come from and all that stuff. So thank you very much for coming in.
Thank you very much for having us.
Yeah, you bet. If you haven't found us already on social media, you can go to Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, or YouTube and find us at SF Diocese anytime. That's it for us today. Hope you'll join us again next week for more Catholic Views.